Hello YouTube and welcome back to another video. This time I am doing a video response to a YouTuber who goes by the name of The Infected Flinch. He put out a great question and essentially it was what are your opinions on HD remakes, reboots, revisions, whatever. Essentially a lot of these re-releases that have been coming out quite a bit in the last generation. And of course now with the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 we've got a lot of re-releases for certain sort of well-established games from the last generations, i.e. the last Tomb Raider and of course The Last of Us. But Infected Flinch wanted to know what were our feelings on generally on these HD remakes and these revisions and of all these sort of older titles and whatnot. And to give you the short answer, I think it's great. Of course, you know, with everything, you need to sort of err on the side of caution, as of course there are going to be developers out there that are probably going to try and exploit the popularity of HD remakes and whatnot, and try and just sort of release any old games and or just give us very shoddy ports in order to make some quick money. But as of late, up to now, I think so far it's been pretty successful, and I've been pretty happy with what's been re-released and reissued. As someone who's quite nostalgic, I do think it's important that certain games are remembered, and I don't mind seeing re-releases of certain titles, especially, you know, some titles that really deserve to be remembered, or games that, you know, probably during its initial run was overlooked by a lot of people, you know, but they felt that there was the games, you know, was strong enough to maybe deserve a second chance at life, so that more people would check it out. So I've got a few examples here, just sort of games that I want to talk about and just sort of explain why I picked them up and what the benefits are to owning these games. The first game I have here, now I'm not going to go into too much detail because there's actually quite a lot of games here, so I'm just going to breeze through them quite quickly and just sort of give you my overall thoughts. But the first game I wanted to talk about briefly was the Prince of Persia Trilogy. Now, I've actually never played that, even though I'm a big PlayStation 2 fan and collector. I actually never played really any of the Prince of Persia games that came out on the PlayStation 2. In fact, from the modern sort of Prince of Persia games, I only got to play the first Prince of Persia game on the PS3, the one with cel-shaded graphics, the one that wasn't really that good. But I completely missed out on these games. So I thought, for me personally, I thought it was great to get, you know, the three games revised. You know, very much like I think a lot of people with The Last of Us on the PlayStation 4, being that probably a lot of PlayStation 4 owners will be people that probably didn't own a PlayStation beforehand, and they're getting a chance to experience a great game. I think for me it's the same with the Prince of Persia trilogy. I never experienced them during their initial run, and I honestly just couldn't be bothered to buy them on the PlayStation 2. So I figured, you know, this was a great way to get a chance to play these games, and I've played the first game so far, and it's actually pretty good. I'm really glad I picked it up. So I think they've done a good job with the HD makeover. I mean, it still looks like a PlayStation 2 game, just, you know, upscaled, but it's still fantastic, and I do enjoy it. Then the next one here is the God of War Collection Volume 2. Now, the reason why for me this one stands out is because this is actually the two titles that were released exclusively for the PlayStation Portable. And, you know, as probably most of you know, PlayStation Portable wasn't that popular here in the West. So a lot of people probably didn't get a chance to play these two titles. So in my opinion, I think it's great that they re-released them on the PlayStation 3. Because they were fantastic games. I actually do own the games on the PlayStation Portable. I've completed them on the PlayStation Portable. But I'm a really big fan of the God of War series in general. So for me, this was a no-brainer. I definitely wanted to play it on my TV and on the PlayStation 3 with you know, upscaled graphics, and it's really good. I highly recommend people check out the two PSP God of War titles because they are really, really good. And I think from a story standpoint, they really add a lot of dimensions to the character of Kratos. Here's another one, very much like the Prince of Persia trilogy, that I never got to experience during its initial run, and that is the ICO and Shadow of the Colossus. And two great games I've heard a lot about. I still haven't played it though, but games I've heard a lot of good things about, and I felt, you know, at the time, prior to this release, both games were going for quite a bit of money on the PlayStation 2, and I wasn't too sure if I was willing to fork over that amount of money for those games. But, you know, of course, once this came out, you know, I just definitely have to jump on it, because these are definitely two games that I do aim to play. And, you know, it made it much more affordable than some of the prices that were going for both these games at the time. Now, here's one game that I want to talk about that's actually a little bit different. This isn't so much a HD remake, but rather a complete revamp of the game. It was based on a PlayStation 1 game, and essentially they rebuilt it from the ground up. And that is the original Resident Evil on the Wii. Now, I've yet to play the game, I've yet to try it out, so I can't really talk about the game as such. But you have to admit, I do like these sorts of remakes, because these are great titles that have probably aged quite a bit, but then have been remade to sort of appeal to a newer generation. Now, I'm a little bit concerned because there's actually going to be a brand new remake of the game again, and at this point in time, I'm not too sure if it's going to be another game built from the ground up, or are they just going to take this game and basically upscale it. So I'm going to be curious to see what they do with this new Resident Evil revamp. But I mean, from what I've heard, a lot of people have said a lot of good things about this game, and I definitely think certain games do deserve to be remade, re-released. I think another one that a lot of fans were crying out for was a remake of Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1. And I think what some people have been thinking is that if they do remake it, it'll probably just be an upscaled HD version. But I don't think that's what fans want. I think what fans really want is a complete overhaul of the game, like a brand new remake. Essentially, the game has been rebuilt from the ground up with new graphics, an improved game engine, and so forth and so on. I think that's probably what the fans are really talking about, and I think that's what Square Enix doesn't really want to do. I think they just probably feel they don't really want to put all the resources into remaking a Final Fantasy VII again from the ground up. So that's probably why we'll never see it. And I don't think they're that interested in just upscaling a PlayStation 1 title. But speaking of upscaling PlayStation 1 titles, we have here Klonoa on the Wii. And I own Klonoa on the PlayStation 1, and it's a great game, it's very enjoyable, and this one is very much the same, but of course, as you would imagine, it does have improved graphics. They also added voice actors, because in the original game, none of the characters spoke in any actual English. It was all done in a make-believe language, which was then subtitled. But in this game, they actually add English language to the characters. I know there are some people that don't like it. I don't mind it personally, and I have to admit it's really pretty to look at. It's just as playable as the previous title, so I do enjoy it just as much as the original. And you know, some people reckon, you know, whether this game was needed or not, but I think that this goes back to what I was saying before. This was a title that at the time of the PlayStation 1 was overlooked by a lot of people, and I think that re-releasing it on the Wii was a good move, because I felt it allowed a new generation of people to check out the game. You know, so this was definitely a game that deserved another lease at life. Now the game did spawn a sequel on the PlayStation 2, and it also spawned a couple of spin-offs on the Game Boy Advance. But you know, the original game definitely didn't really get its due, and I'm glad that it was re-released on the Wii, because I think it's definitely a series that deserves a lot more attention from people. Now, there are a few games here that I want to bring up that fall into a slightly different camp. Now, there is one game here which was released originally as an online-only title, and it is a remake, a complete remake of a classic title that a lot of people have fond memories of, and that is DuckTales Remastered. Now, I am actually very much a big supporter of this title, and I would love to see more companies do remakes of classic NES titles. Personally, I don't really hold that much nostalgia to the original DuckTales, as I actually never got around to playing DuckTales on the NES back in the day. I only got to play DuckTales on the Game Boy when I was a kid. I never knew anyone that had the NES version. But this is fantastic. This is actually what I would define as a really good remastered remake of a classic. You know, they rebuilt it from the ground up, but they redrew the characters, made them in really lovely hand-drawn HD. You know, added the original voice cast to the game, and it really sort of rejuvenates this classic title, and I think it's well worth owning. If you're a fan of the original, of course you're always going to have your preference for the original because that's where your nostalgia lies, but I definitely think you'd enjoy this game as well. And of course, for all the people that weren't around during the NES era or never got to try the game in general, this is definitely one that more and more people should check out, as it is really a classic throwback to a really great time in 2D platforming. And another title I want to bring up here, and this one is a little bit different because probably a lot of people aren't even aware that this is actually a remake, reboot, and that is Under the Feet HD. And some of you might be thinking this isn't a remake, this is a brand new game, and no, it isn't, guys. This is actually a remake of a Saturn title, and in this game you can actually play, there's two versions of the game. There is this revamped HD version, and then there's also the original Saturn version as well available to play. And again, you know, this is a re-release of, you know, a much older title, and you know, I mean, there are probably other shoot 'em ups that came out on the Saturn that probably deserve a re-release much more than this game, but I have to admit it's a really good game. It's definitely one that sticks out amongst all the shooters that are available, and you know, it's great that you're actually able to play the original version as well as the updated, revamped version as well. And you know, for me, this is a prime example of why I like remakes and remastered versions, especially if they give you the option to play the original as well. I think probably the one failing of DuckTales was that it doesn't give you the option to play the original game. I think that would have made this even better if the option to play the original was there as well. Moving on now, this is one that I definitely want to bring up. Now, this is essentially, again, another one of those remakes, remasters. This one is a bit more questionable. Now, the games themselves are fantastic, you know, definitely worth it. But some people might say, well, you know, is it really necessary? But I think it is, because I'm a fan of the series anyway, and I would love to. And I jumped at the chance of owning this, and that is the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection. This essentially features all the Metal Gear games, and I definitely think it's worth it. The only bad thing about this is that while it does have Metal Gear Solid, it's a download-only title, and it's not remade or revamped. Unfortunately, it's not the Twin Snakes version that was available on the GameCube, but you basically have all the games that have been upscaled to HD, and of course you've got Metal Gear Solid 4 as well. So I think from probably not a necessity for a lot of people. If you just want to play the remakes, you can just sort of get the standard edition of the HD remakes of the Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and Peace Walker. But for hardcore Metal Gear fans like myself, to have all the games in one collection is definitely worth it, and I'm glad to own it. It's, you know, it's a great series, and I think it's definitely a series that needs to be remembered. Especially if you've got the original Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake on this as well. You know, those are two 8-bit games that I feel that probably a lot of people overlooked at the time. I'd certainly never heard of them. I'd never heard of Metal Gear until Metal Gear Solid came out. So yeah, I mean, certain games definitely need to be re-released so that we can remember and appreciate them, I think, today. And lastly, I'm just going to breeze through these quickly. We've got Strider 2014. This is actually a remake, remastered version of the original Strider game. It's basically a game that's been rebuilt from the ground up, a reimagining, you could say, of the original Strider game, and it's fantastic. It plays great. They did something different with it, and it's definitely one I recommend. This is a Japanese import version, and that's because the game was never released physically over here in the West. So I definitely recommend getting the Japanese import version, as the game actually does play in English, so definitely worth checking out. Then, of course, we have Vampire Resurrection, which is the remastered HD version of Darkstalkers 1 and 2. No, sorry, it's Darkstalkers 2 and 3. And this, again, was only a digital release here in the West, but in Japan they got a physical copy. And while I much would have preferred a brand new game in the Darkstalkers / Vampire Savior series, it's great to be able to play these games in upscaled HD because it looks fantastic. It looks really colourful, really jumps off the screen, and you know, they're well worth playing. And lastly, I've got Dungeons and Dragons. This is Chronicles of Mystaria and Tower of Doom. Again, this is a re-release of a classic Saturn / arcade title from Capcom. It was re-released over here as a digital only release, but was given the physical treatment in Japan. And it's two arcade side-scrolling beat-em-ups in one. And this is definitely something more that I welcome. I do like compilations of classic games. I think I don't want a lot of these games to get forgotten. And I'm very, very happy that Capcom decided to re-release this game. I just wish they would, you know, I mean, I know a lot of it is down to licensing or whatnot, but I would kill to get physical copies of Aliens vs Predator or you know, Final Fight series, or you know, just get compilations of all three titles. You know, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, etc., etc. So yeah, like I said right at the start, I am a fan of HD collections. I do think that they are important. I think they allow a lot of people to try out these games, the ones that didn't get to play them for the first time. You know, I mean, even like me, you know, I had a PlayStation 2, but I still didn't get a chance to try out a lot of these great games. And I think some games do deserve a second lease of life. I do welcome that. I can think of a few games that during its initial run were ignored by a lot of people. Games like Okami and Beyond Good and Evil. I think those games that were critically acclaimed at the time but were ignored by a lot of people. So in turn they were re-released, and I do think that's a good thing. Of course, I don't want it to become a trend. I don't want any old game to get the remastered treatment. I think they do deserve to be games that were either critically acclaimed and completely ignored, or games that were considered a classic, and time has just moved on, and I think it's nice to sort of have avenues to revisit them. You know, especially because I know some people might disagree because they say, well, you know, there's always the original hardware, you can go back and buy that, but there are a lot of people that just aren't willing to go back and buy an NES or a Super Nintendo or Mega Drive. And I think it's great to create avenues to play some of these classic games, you know. And then you've got the Sega Mega Drive collection that was released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. I mean, I play that a lot. You know, there's 40 classic Mega Drive games on there. A lot of content. You know, there's quite a few games I never got to own on the Mega Drive, and there's a lot of games that I like to revisit without having to pull out my Mega Drive each time, and I think it's great. Especially since some of these games do cost a lot of money. You know, like Streets Rage 3, for example, goes for a lot of money, and I think a lot of people would be unwilling to spend that much on the game. But you know, to be able to play all three games at once, you know, and buy the compilation, which only costs about £10, I think is a great deal. So yeah, I'm in favour of them. I think they have their benefits, but I think we do need to be careful that there are developers out there that might try and rip us off. I know there have been a few HD collections that have been less than stellar. The Zone of the Enders, I hear, was not a very good port. And I also hear that the Silent Hill HD collection had its issues as well. But I'm going to leave it there, guys. And thank you very much for watching. And thanks, of course, to the Infected Flinch for this question. Really glad I was able to do a video response. I will be back very soon, so stay tuned. Bye-bye.